All right, welcome to Zoom Out Podcast. I got here Mike Hobart from Bitcoin Veterans. Mike's a versatile professional with a rich background in diverse fields. He was a freelance researcher, garnered over 1 million views across multiple articles, and provided guidance for firms like KPMG and Standard Power. He's also the host of Bitcoin Veterans, how I know him, where he discusses topics with his four co-hosts that are relevant to veterans currently enlisted and civilians interested in defending and protecting freedom. Mike, welcome to Zoom Out.
Thanks for inviting me, man. We had a little scheduling hiccup on my part. I was telling you that my week got explicitly chaotic in the last like 2 or 3 days. So again, apologies for that, but
Hey,
I'm
no
excited to
worries,
be
no
here with you.
worries. I get it. I get it. Um, I want to jump right in. This podcast is intended for people just brand new to Bitcoin, don't know a thing about it. Um,
Okay.
and usually it's easy to talk about the solution before the problem, but I kind of foresee the problem as a lack of financial freedom. I kind of want to start out with, what do you think's holding people back from financial freedom?
Um, Believe it or not, that answer is going to be a lot more complicated than the question sounds.
Yeah.
Um, First and foremost, I think I think people have gotten complacent in their valuation of freedom first and foremost. I was actually talking about this I had a 20-hour day on Thursday, and the last 6 hours of that 20-hour day was actually my fault because I got involved with a spaces conversation with a colonel by the name of Patrick Fox on Twitter and another colonel and a paratrooper and a former CIA agent. And we were talking about a lot of like the goings on between, we'll just say, events over the last 3 or 4 years, um, especially with regards to the military. And there, that funny enough, that question, not financial freedom, but the question of freedom itself was brought up.
Hmm.
And I bring this up because it's obvious, it's clearly relevant. Is that if you don't value freedom, you're not going to value financial freedom either. And I think
Oof.
that the American population has lost its what would it be? Its penchant, maybe just its taste for freedom, because we haven't been touched by war in a while. Because like one problem you have with dealing with people, and especially dealing with people in large groupings or mass um, conglomerations or aggregations, is that they kind of I describe them as a group of rabid goldfish. The memory is very short, and then they can get riled up very, very quickly. And we haven't really, the last time we were touched by war was 9/11, right? That was the
Right.
last time that America was personally touched. And since then, we have the entire population, especially the last 4 years, the entire population has gotten really rude awakenings to how we've been lied to. Like, real, if you really dig into it, we've been lied to since basically World War II. Um, and
Do you
that's
do you
Go ahead,
think
man.
do you think that's leading to the ability, not the ability, but being lied to would lead to them having a false sense of reality, and then therefore you have some false perception of um, freedom or
Yeah,
security? And what was that phrase? If you want security and freedom, you end up
you're
getting
gonna get both.
or
Yeah,
neither.
yeah, or you deserve neither. It's
You
Benjamin
deserve
Franklin, I
neither, right?
believe.
That's right.
Um, so I think that there's that problem, which you could have an entire podcast just on that.
Sure.
Um, but if you're not valuing, like I said, if you're not valuing freedom, you're not going to know or conceptualize about like valuing financial freedom. And
That's
this
a
is
good point.
something I believe you had actually did you watch the latest podcast we did for Bitcoin veterans with Joel Lambert?
I that's not in queue.
Okay, so you're gonna like it because we actually talked specifically about this question with him, and I had a question for him specifically on this topic, and I brought up kind of getting to the point of you're not gonna really value. true freedom or Bitcoin or financial freedom without understanding the the bounds of the current financial system. You're not going to understand that, like, so if you don't understand how the dollar operates, you're not going to appreciate how Bitcoin operates. You're not going to understand, or you're not going to value freedom outside the system until you understand how the system works, right? So, like, and one good way of like getting exposure to that we also talked about, that a bunch of us have talked about in Bitcoin for the last like 4 years explicitly, is the book Confessions of an Economic Hitman.
Yes, finished that last year. Great book.
Yeah. Did you read the newest version with the part two?
I had I downloaded whatever audiobook popped up first, so
Okay, so
probably.
you probably did. He would have been talking about when he had an assassination attempt.
Yes.
So that's a really important aspect to the entire kind of like how the US centric system works. Because with the use of Hollywood and desensitizing the public to a lot of these things, people think that just because they saw it on Hollywood first, it doesn't mean it's real.
So could you say that people aren't valuing financial freedom and more importantly freedom because their perception is that they're already safe and already free because of
Yes.
how
Yeah.
interesting. So
And
then go ahead.
and going further, actually, after we wrap up our conversation, I have two essays for my Substack that I am going to be finishing editing, so I can publish the first one today at some point. Where I'm actually, this is really interesting for me because it's along the same like kind of like topic, is that um, when people are raised in this kind of environment of like believing they're safe and secure, they get to this point of believing that nothing bad can happen to them. And if you think about it, when your entire worldview is reliant upon something like that, and then that and then the framing gets shattered to the point of where you realize, oh, I could actually die. Like being military men, like that,
Hmm.
like you witness people that like that destroys a lot of people. And
So
so just in the realm of financial freedom or financial security, like I don't know about you, but I've been trying to have these conversations with like my friends and family. It's like, guys, like legitimate recession or even depression is a real plausibility. People don't want to talk about it because like then that suggests that they take on pain or suffering in the form of financial pain or suffering that they have never conceptualized before, even if
so
they grew up during the global financial crisis.
so one thing I think I'm grabbing from this is what's holding people back from financial freedom is that they are the people like in the movie The Matrix. They just don't realize they're in the Matrix. They have to be
Yes,
able a lack of consciousness about what's truly going on in the world.
exactly.
Also said like what was the story with one fish said to the other that I want to go to the ocean, and the other fish is like, well, look around you, you're in the water right now, and
Yeah.
you
How's
know
the water? And they're like,
how's the
what? What do you
oh yeah,
mean?
exactly. So then you're having a conversation. I'm sure you've had multiple conversations with friends who are new to Bitcoin, and you get around to these conversations, and we're on the topic of, trying to open the eyes to a different reality or what we see. And you got a chance for an elevator pitch based off of what we just said about freedom, financial freedom, lack of seeing. What would be your personal Bitcoin elevator pitch in this moment?
Oh man, a friend of mine asked me this the other day, that we align on just about everything, and the one thing we don't align on is like the viewpoint of Bitcoin. I'm not good at 2 minute elevator pitches because I tend to talk too much. Um, but I think one thing that I would say is that the 2 minute elevator pitch for Bitcoin would be kind of providing the carrot in front of the subject with just it's a it's a monetary asset that is outside of the current monetary system, like something along those lines. Because I try and cater it to every individual. Because like we were just discussing, if it's somebody that I don't believe would value the freedom of an asset like Bitcoin, then you kind of like stay away from that, right? So if it's somebody that seems more like interested in just investing and like earning more capital or cash in the dollar value range, um, it would be something along the lines of more like it's a it's a digitally native currency that was organically developed without a centralized organization or entity driving it, and it's now getting to the point of global adoption. So it's a provides an investment opportunity comparable to being able to invest directly in the internet when it was still a military DARPA project.
Man, so I just had the realization what we're trying to do is describe to fish in a fishbowl that there's this completely other fishbowl over here, but they're not realizing they're sitting in water yet. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So we got to explain why to explain why this fishbowl is better, we have to describe that first. Not only your fishbowl is probably full of junk, but you're in a fishbowl. You're in the water, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And
Uh,
that also accurately describes just like how I've been taking the approach with like friends and family. Like they know just by seeing my activity on like online or on Facebook or whatever that I like to be involved in Bitcoin stuff.
yeah.
Um, so I don't press the topic onto them. Like
Anymore,
if
same thing. Same
yeah,
thing.
if you know anything about like talking with friends and family, is that like if you're actually the subject expert, they're not going to listen to you because you are a friend or a family member. You could say something that is completely factually correct. Somebody that nobody in the family or the friend group knows can hear the exact same thing said the exact same way, and then they'll be like, "Oh, this guy said it." It's like, "Yeah, idiot! I told you that 3 weeks ago."
Dude, you're preaching to the choir because I'm a teacher by trade. And what I tell my kids and I tell my students, it depends on my my kids may not listen in the way that the students do. And I have parents tell me all the time that their kid won't listen to them, but then they hear something I say. Yeah, there's definitely like who's the authority and talking to your friends and family. They also have the aspect of knowing you before Bitcoin, so it's hard for them to see that.
And something that I even just realized too that I'd never thought about, which is why I like having conversations like this because I'm constantly realizing or learning new things. Is that if you think about it, that's actually on a species level. That's a really useful filter for trying to filter out specific biases, right? Because like you don't like just because like say you're in an unhealthy family environment where like the parents are trying to establish this like system of control over their kids where they're trying to establish themselves almost as like a god or a paragon of knowledge, like they
Sure.
know everything. If kids aren't naturally inclined to listen less to the entity that they are constantly exposed to and seek information from outside of that echo chamber, then like this family environment very rapidly becomes a slave kind of like idolization system, right? So it's actually serving a lot of good purposes. I'd never thought about it that way though.
That's intense. And it's not only are we trying to keep the fish in the fishbowl. I'm gonna run this analogy all the way as far as I can.
Yeah,
But it's not only that, it's that whole like pay no attention to the you are I'm not even gonna mention you're in the fishbowl. This is the fishbowl and this is how you live. You there's no need to look outside that because there's no perception of anything out
yeah,
there. That's
yep.
intense.
And you
That's
can
intense.
and you can think about like say like keep running with this analogy because I think this is how like people that haven't like gone down enough rabbit holes like you really want the simplicity, right? You could think about the US as its own fishbowl, but then there's like the European Union is another fishbowl, but we have a kind of like little tunnel that has access between the two, right? So it's not that they're completely foreign. It's just that like the capability to like transfer back and forth is there. But then you have like Russia and China and the BRICS nations are their own fishbowl,
Hmm.
like stuff like that. You can try and view things that way, but the unfortunate thing is that our fishbowl that we are currently in involves a lot less awareness and consciousness than all the others.
So let me go ahead and bring this to a focus. Let's think of the fishbowl of either current or past veterans. You're like I
Okay.
said, you're co-host of the Bitcoin Veterans.
Yep.
Um, and feel free to take a moment, describe Bitcoin Veterans to the audience.
Oh, I'm very bad at doing the sales and the marketing, which is like, believe it or not, because
We'll get Shane on
it's
here.
it's
He's the guy for that.
hell yeah, because it's interesting because I was a communications and marketing manager for Great American Mining, but I was more communications than I was marketing,
Okay.
clearly. Um, but so Bitcoin Veterans is actually, it's really just kind of like a thing of passion that bubbled up almost at a whim. So like just going through like the Bitcoin conversations, all of us that are in the group, Shane, Alex, Jordan, and Gabe and I, we all just kind of started running into each other in the spaces on Twitter, and we would constantly be referred to as far as like opinions or points of view from the military or the veteran angle. And so we're like, we need to provide a kind of place where all of our guys and gals can come together and communicate and exchange, and then also so we can like provide just points of view that are not fully representative of the entire group, because obviously we're not going to be able to give a voice to every individual, but voice a lot of the concerns or the things that we're looking at, right? Or like the difficulties, like kind of what you're getting at with regards to talking with military minded folks
Yeah.
or military families with regards to just like financial freedom, or why like the kind of service that Bitcoin can serve for them.
Do you find veterans as more or less receptive when Bitcoin and financial freedom come up?
It Funny enough, well, it's not funny when you understand the military. It depends on their job, from what I've seen. Um, those that have had experience with fully getting an understanding of the military doesn't value you as a human or an individual, they value you as a statistic and a tool, which I actually kind of find that realization a little bit silly. Believe it or not, like I'm not saying that the military guys that got blown up like Shane and all those others, that like they aren't justified in their frustration with that information dawning on them. But just thinking about how large a country level military is, like leadership just can't afford to think of you as anything other than a statistic.
Right.
Um, but the reason I say that I think it depends on the job is that the individuals that get exposed to specifically like things like cover up, um, getting like having the veil pierced in that kind of manner to realize, oh, it's not actually how they tell us it goes. There are things happening behind curtains that I don't even know exist. And so like getting exposure to that, typically those guys, in the whole military veteran conversation, typically talking about Bitcoin is a little bit easier for them, especially the guys that have gone to schools like Ranger School or SEER, of being just like establishing redundancies of preparedness and making sure like they're like survival minded. Those guys also tend to be really, it's just like for them, just seeing Bitcoin and understanding that it's outside of the current system makes it completely different from everything else. That's a level of preparedness and freedom that other
Refreshing, I would
people,
assume.
yeah, that other people don't appreciate. Because that's why I brought it up with Joel Lambert this past week. I'm like, okay, you're like, because Joel Lambert's was a Navy SEAL. I usually say is this a Navy SEAL, because once a SEAL, always a SEAL, in my opinion. Like, you don't lose out on those kind of capabilities.
Absolutely.
And one thing that I think a lot of people on the civilian side also don't understand is that in order to have freedom, you have to have power through capability, right? Like, you have to be capable of surviving in a lot of different environments to actually enjoy true freedom, which is why the whole Benjamin Franklin quote is like, if you want both freedom and security, you're going to get neither, because in order to be truly free, you basically have no security except through that you provide for yourself,
You
right?
realize that veil of security, that perceived veil, is not really there.
Yeah.
And so basically veterans then are more primed to see Bitcoin because they're primed to see alternate realities. They're pushing so far on the edges that they see all of this
Yeah.
and have the ability to see that. That's
Yep.
brilliant.
As well as the veterans that are also cybersecurity
Oh, sure.
focused.
That's intense. So you see Bitcoiner or veterans latching onto Bitcoin easier, and that kind of is where.
They
What's your
they
audience that?
they
Go ahead.
I'll add a caveat to that, a disclaimer. They can't, because the ones that aren't of that survival capability focused, I've noticed, have tend to be the ones that are heavily indoctrinated,
Mm,
to the point of where believing that anything that challenges the dollar is challenging America. It's
yeah,
like, well, that's not true, because the dollar that we use is not constitutional. And if we're not challenging the Constitution, which we're serving to defend the Constitution, we're not challenging America. We're looking for a better solution for America, right? But that's a way of thinking that not a lot are used to.
that's great. That's great. Is there anything that I'm missing? Anything relevant you'd like to share as we wrap up here?
Um, I think it's with these Bitcoin discussions, especially where we are now. Um, I think it's important to mention to, like, viewers or listeners that the ETF discussion is a lot of noise. Um, in my opinion, there's not a whole lot of value to it besides just increasing the dollar value of Bitcoin holdings, if it does. The reason I say if is that viewers or listeners can look up the chart for gold and then look up when the gold ETF went live, and Price did some interesting stuff before it took off for a while.
Hmm.
So
Well, and
be aware of that.
I like to think of it as the ETFs are good for Bitcoin lowercase b, the asset, and bad for uppercase B, Bitcoin, the
The
network,
network. Yeah.
because you're losing out on some of those properties that make it the
Yeah.
dominant monetary system.
Yep. And then on top of that, I would also just, I'm behooved to just like not necessarily warn, because I guess that can sound a little scary, but just be prepared for not only this year but probably the rest of this decade to be excessively chaotic.
Mm,
So you're gonna have to learn how to filter out the noise and identify good resources to utilize to see what's actually going on in the world, because can't rely on the major news media outlets now.
that's
Um,
right.
and then, like we were discussing before we went live with recording, I would really appreciate everybody focusing specifically on their fitness and their physical health and mental health.
Oh,
Because that's
yeah,
those are and you can tackle both of those health silos by simply improving your physical fitness. Like, there's so much science out there with mental health issues and chronic metabolic syndromes that get solved by just improving your physical fitness. Um, that's how we get America back on track. Is everybody just kind of focusing on like the not the bare minimums, the foundational things. So, like,
absolutely.
individual health and like family health, like just focus on those.
I love that. And it kind of goes back to you have to be able to realize you're in the water before you realize there's the fishbowl, before you realize there's another fishbowl. And
Yeah,
if we can kind of start to see that there are possible alternate realities, there is a healthy system, and when there which in which there's not seed oils.
yeah,
There's a healthy monetary system in which there's no inflation. Um, you have to be able to see outside of your current worldview. Uh,
yeah,
I think that's I think that's a great place to wrap up. Mike
yeah.
Hobart, thank you for joining me on Zoom Out. Do you have anywhere you want to shout out to?
Obviously, shout out to like my Bitcoin veterans crew and the Bitcoin veterans community. And I will also add, which we add on at the end of every episode, which we do live every Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern. So that'll be 6 p.m. Central for those of you that are in the Midwest or Texas time. Um, we'll also add that like we have a community of guys where if you want to like learn about Bitcoin or whatever, or get involved with like some of the survival stuff that we're going to be working on, like all you have to do is reach out to any one of us. You can search us on Twitter. Bitcoin veterans is the handle. You can search me on Twitter, which is the Mike Hobart. And I always emphasize the because I have two E's in it. So it's THEE, Mike Hobart, Hobart, just so people understand. So they don't run into any scammers or anything like that. But I will tell you, like, I also warn you that I've been shadow banned for like 3 or 4 years
Ha,
straight. So it's pretty hard. It can be
man.
pretty hard to find me.
Well, I'll make sure to put everything in the show notes. Mike, thank you for joining me. We'll
Yeah,
talk
man. I
soon.
appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.